Hey everyone, thank you for joining us. We realize that the cocktail reception is right after our talk, so we're going to make this super entertaining, and we're locking the doors in the back. So if you're trying to get out, not going to be able to do it. Thank you, and hello, my name is Anshul Mangal. I'm the president of Project Farma and the president of Precision for Medicine. It's my pleasure to moderate today's discussion. This topic is near and dear to all of us at Precision. Since 2013, Precision's interdisciplinary teams have been advancing clinical, manufacturing, and commercial solutions to help innovators, like many of you, transform patient lives. Having been a partner to over 150 advanced therapy organizations and 75% of the commercialized cell and gene therapies, we know that delivering a cell and gene therapy to market requires a comprehensive and nuanced approach. Therefore, we'll be hearing from various experts on the stage today on these complexities. They'll give us an update on their respective companies, share their expectations for 2024, and what they're most excited about. We will also hear about the current challenges that the industry is facing and predictions for the industry. So, getting started, joining us today are Phil Sear, SVP at Precision Value and Health, Doug Danison, Head of Commercial as the Cell and Gene Therapy Business Unit at Bayer, Stefan Irion, Chief Scientific Officer at BlueRock, Helen Sabzevari, CEO and President of Precigen, and Igor Bilinsky, Chief Operating Officer of Iovance Therapeutics. So, Doug, I'm going to start with you. Could you provide an overview of Bayer's strategic vision for advancing cell and gene therapies globally?
Yeah, and thanks for having me here. It's great to be here, and thanks everybody for staying when it's almost drink time. So it's good to have an engaged audience if you're deciding to be here. So Bayer made a decision several years ago to really invest in cell and gene therapy. It saw the advances that were going on, and it saw an opportunity to, as I'm sure everybody's aware, had largely a small molecule-based platform, and they decided that they saw the innovation that was coming from cell and gene therapy, and there's a lot of diseases that were undruggable, or the existing diseases where the standard of care really weren't meeting the needs of patients. And Bayer has our strategy is hunger for none and health for all, and as you engage for health for all, there's a lot of opportunity. So Bayer decided to acquire two cell and gene therapy companies, and BlueRock is represented right here, BlueRock Therapeutics and also AskBio. They're independent development engines, so they run relatively independently. They're wholly owned subsidiaries. Myself, I work in commercial along with a commercial team, and our job is to work closely with those groups and to make sure we're developing good commercial strategies to make sure the assets, the products are prepared to come to the market. And then we work closely with Bayer's overall scope so that we can bring all those markets, bring our products to the globe. So it's kind of a balanced strategy. You let the innovation innovate by itself and not be encumbered by a big pharma, but then take the benefit of a big pharma to deploy all those assets all around the world.
Thanks, Doug. Stefan, are you happy with the acquisition of Bayer? And could you share some insights into your innovative approaches to cell therapies, particularly for neurological disorders?
Of course. Of course we are, and I sincerely mean it, but I think that probably wasn't for me to answer. It's a great partnership that we have together with the folks at Bayer, and you can see when we maybe talk later a little bit about our manufacturing strategy, how there's really a transition from an early phase biotech company going into large pharma that can enable that transition much more smoothly. But you asked more about where we are and what our platform looks like, and especially in the neurology space that we're active in. So at BlueRock we focused on bringing transformative cell therapies to patients in need, and we do that by replacing the tissue that's lost in the disease, restoring circuits that exist in these organ systems, and really reimagining how we can treat diseases. If you take a step back and how degenerative disease is typically treated, we try to make whatever is left work harder, or we try to treat the side effects or the symptoms of the disease. None of the current therapies are really aimed largely at restoring that function, and that's what we can achieve with our pluripotent stem cell platform. And so we're active, obviously, in the brain. It's uniquely positioned to be a target for cell replacement therapy because of cell dose and the sort of special immune privileged place that it exists in. But we're also really interested in restoring muscular function after heart attack by putting new heart muscle cells into patients that suffer from heart disease. in our program that we're going in the clinic this year together with our partner Opsys, is to replace the cells of the back of the eye that sense light and turn that light signal into an electrical signal that a person that is blind can now interpret as a picture, like hopefully all of us here can see. So I really see this transformative potential that this therapy has, that it can bring to the degenerative space, that we'll see us developing over the next couple of years.
Thanks, Stefan. Phil, would love to have you share some insights into Precigen, how it's helping organizations like the ones we have today on the panel to bring cell and gene therapies to market.
Absolutely, Anshul. As Anshul mentioned, Precigen has a number of entities, and so we've been involved with advanced therapies for many years, and our breadth of services allows us to look at advanced therapies slightly differently. We don't see it as a straight line, and so when we're thinking about developing NAB and TAB assays with our partners, or running a clinical trial with our partners, or developing their manufacturing or their health economic models, we see it more integrated. So some of the things that we end up doing is integrating, let's say, commercial earlier on. So as a health economist, I'm often brought into clinical trial design, and manufacturing is brought into as we're thinking about NAB and TAB assays. So we've been doing this with our partners for a fair amount of time, and very excited.
Thanks, Phil. Helen, would love to hear from you. I mean, I think I find Precigen so unique in the fact that it's using both cell and gene therapies to deliver the next generation of precision immunology drugs. Can you give us a little bit more about Precigen?
Absolutely. So Precigen, as Anshul said, it's a unique company because it uses both gene therapy and cell therapy technologies. We have two major platforms. That one is, the way I describe it, because I really see the cell and gene therapy as the next frontier for immuno-oncology. That is the reality of the situation. And I'm an immuno-oncologist when it wasn't a chic field many years ago. So with that in mind, I think there are two ways to train the immune system. One is from within. And in that sense, you can take some of the brakes off, as we have done with the checkpoint inhibitor, and you can push the immune system, but that's not the whole story, and we are seeing the end result of that, right? With the many trials that was not able to get to many of different indication and different, basically, outcome that we wanted. At the same token, there is a point in time that you need to train the cells and take them out of the system and retrain them. And this is why the cell therapy becomes very important. We have two platforms. One is an adenovirus platform, which is differentiated, basically, at Precigen. And why I say that, it's simply, you can repeat dose, and you can repeat dose for a year and a half on a monthly basis, the patients. And this platform is very specific. The gorilla vectors, we don't have pre-immunity to them. And by actually the science and what we have done, we see that neutralizing antibodies are kept at bay. And basically, you keep generating enhancing T cells. And in that setting, we have gone to the rare diseases in RRP, which I will explain a little bit later. And now we are on an accelerated path for the BLA submission. On the ultra CAR T side, I wouldn't call it a Ferrari of the CAR Ts, but why we call it ultra? Because we were looking at all of the challenges that CAR T programs had, from manufacturing to the safety, from the perspective of cost. And what we have done is basically developed an ultra CAR T platform that is overnight. They have been designed in such a way that they expand and are under control in a patient body. So you don't need centralized manufacturing. And with that, they also contain safety switches. and also genes such as IL-15 that is already in there, and the mechanism that reduces the checkpoint inhibitor, so you don't need to add that. Therefore, you have safety, you have mechanisms that you can use if there is anything goes wrong. At the same time, the manufacturing is done at the hospital because it's not a viral based. We have advanced the non-viral based platform that now under probably 12 minutes you can generate 4 billion transfected cells, and then the next day a fresh drug is basically infused to the patient, autologous CAR Ts. And in that setting, we have now 3 clinical trials at various stages, and we have treated more than 70 patients across different hospitals. And I think this is what it makes a difference with changing this manufacturing paradigm, as well as then bring the cost down, because in one day you can generate these cells and you can redose as many times as you wish at any given point, even when the patients have relapses or mutational relapses. So Precigen has been working on these 2 platforms, and obviously in the first platform we are advanced now, as I mentioned, in the process of submission of a BLA, and in UltraCAR we have moved from phase 1 to expansion phase 1b, both in solid tumors and hematological.
Thanks, Helen. Moving to someone who just recently had their BLA approved, Igor, I think everybody knows about Iovance and how it's revolutionizing the TIL cell therapy field as the first FDA approval for TIL cell therapy. Can you share more about Iovance and how you're transforming cancer care?
Happy to. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be here. So the mission of Iovance is to innovate, develop, and deliver to patients with cancer TIL therapies or tumor-infiltrating lymphocyte therapies. Our focus is on solid cancers, which is 90% of all cancers, so the opportunity is significant and the unmet need is significant. Our first product, Amtagvi, or lifileucel, just received FDA approval in February of this year for patients with advanced post-PD-1 melanoma. And again, the opportunity in that field is significant. It's the first therapy approved in that setting. About 8,000 patients die annually in the US from melanoma, about 13,000 in the EU. And it's also the first T-cell therapy approved by the FDA for solid tumors. Right now we're focused on the commercial launch. The launch is going very well. We started with about 30 authorized treatment centers at approval, and now expanding that to 50 ATCs by the end of May. The next step is to file applications for approval in the EU before the end of this first half of this year, and then the UK and Canada in the second half of this year. Beyond the post-PD-1 melanoma, our strategy is really threefold. One is expand to other solid tumor types, including non-small cell lung cancer, where we are conducting a pivotal phase 2, and, for example, endometrial cancer. The second pillar is expanding to earlier lines of therapy. We're conducting a pivotal phase 3 in frontline melanoma. And the third pillar is developing new next generations of technologies. For example, post-PD-1 inactivated TIL, which is in the clinic, and cytokine tethered TILs, which are in preclinical development. So overall, we see the potential of the Iovance TIL technology to benefit tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of patients with solid tumors annually in the world.
That's amazing. Thank you. So we've talked a lot today about all the great achievements that we've seen in the cells and gene therapy field in 2023, and I think the overall sentiment that has been present at the conference today is we're very excited about 2024. Tim Hunt and ARM forecasted the approval over a dozen cell and gene therapies by the end of 2024, so it's going to be a very, very busy year. I would love to start asking the panel, what would you say are some of the top technologies that you think are poised to disrupt advanced medicines in 2024? Helen, would love to get your take first.
I think from our side, it has become clear, for instance, the positions that FDA has been taking in regard to the gene therapy currently, and accelerated approvals, some of the aspects. For us, is really advancing our adenovirus platform, which is unique. And we have gone to the rare disease of recurrent respiratory papillomatosis. These are patients that they are developing benign tumors in their trachea and on the vocal cords. These patients have no other therapy except continuous surgery. Some of the patients that we have treated have had over 300 surgery. Practically every month they go under surgery to be able to breathe or speak. And now with the gene therapy and this platform, we have been able to generate basically a vaccine that you can vaccinate 4 times in a span of 85 days. And the data that have been shown to the FDA and led to the accelerated approval is 50% of these patients, they do not require any surgery, and they have been past more than 2 years now as a follow-up, and they have not required any surgery, and the rest, they have reduced the number of surgeries significantly. So I think for us, definitely this is the arena that you are basically training your own immune system from within. And now it's the time, especially in rare diseases, but you can imagine that the same thing now, it applies for various tumors, especially like HPV-related tumors in cervical cancer, head and neck, which, by the way, we have moved this platform to. And on our UltraCAR, really, as I mentioned, it's the ease of moving directly in one day to patient. I was very touched with this morning a speaker that she was speaking about her child, and the fact that they had to go through number of chemos and bone marrow and failures, and then be receiving the CAR-Ts. And then at the end of the day, even with that, they had to wait 4 weeks as their child was getting worse and worse, because obviously the manufacturing has been an issue. And this has been one of the paradigms that we have been discussing with the FDA, that how can you shorten this? And we have now currently in 1 day, next day, the patient comes in, and the next day they have their autologous T cells. Why is this important? It's really, when we talk about precision medicine, and we always use that term, but at the end of the day, we have to keep on moving these platforms toward really addressing the patients with the right drugs that they receive, and we have much better response rates than 10 or 15 or 20% in the clinic, because at the end of the day, that is just simply is not good enough. And I think that is what the field is moving forward to.
Stefan, would love your perspective on what you're really excited about in terms of technologies this upcoming year.
Yeah, I think this time it's really the combination of all the learnings from these therapies that come together to better all of our approaches in how we treat this. It's probably not a single one I would call out, but even just the expansion of where the CAR T-cell field is heading into autoimmunity. I'm sure everybody in this room read the New England Journal of Medicine paper, 15 patients treated, 3 different diseases, every patient responds. I mean, it's phase 1 trial, but we'll see. But this is amazing, and what that field has done for us as a cell therapy field is quite remarkable, from understanding how we produce these cells, training the talent, interactions with regulators, payers, and so forth. That all really benefits us as we move into other areas like neurology, cardiology, and other immunological applications. Where then we at BlueRock in particular are interested in allogeneic approaches, where we can have cells potentially manufactured at lower cost, but also have them off the shelf and ready, where in certain indications, the patient cannot wait, to your point, right? Where you want to have that overnight potentially as a therapeutic approach. And so all these technologies together, I think, really move that field forward. And on the pluripotent side, we see many of these therapies now emerging, not just ours, but really interesting data coming in epilepsy, diabetes, and so forth. Quite exciting times.
Igor, Stefan just touched on allogeneic cell therapies. We also just heard from Massimo on some of the pros and cons of autologous versus allogeneic, and Would love to get your take on, will allogeneic therapies really overcome and be a more efficient solution to autologous cell therapies?
Perhaps in some areas, but I'll be contrarian here. So the Iovance approach is by design patient-specific and polyclonal. And the reason we believe that's important is that the neoantigen repertoire varies a lot from patient to patient in solid tumors, in contrast to heme malignancies, for example. And for that purpose, the autologous approach is essential. It's been shown by Iovance and many others that if you look at the TCRs present in TILs, they vary significantly from patient to patient with little or no overlap in the TCR repertoire. And that justifies, in our view, the importance of the patient-specific approach here.
Phil, would love your perspective on what technologies you think are poised to be very disruptive this year.
Well, I think the merger of cell therapies with gene therapies and editing techniques, you know, we all know CRISPR, it's not new, but you're seeing new and more specific editing techniques like prime editing, and I think that's going to help a lot when thinking about immunogenicity and how we can get to rare diseases also.
I would love your final take on the topic of technologies that you're excited about in 2024.
I think there's a lot. It's just, this meeting's been impressive to see all the things that are coming out. I mean, we talked a lot about technologies. I guess what I'm looking at from a marketplace perspective is, you know, can we access larger and larger patient populations now with the sickle cell indications coming out in the U.S. and we're hearing a lot of discussions about reimbursement in Europe as well. I mean, how do we go from relatively small populations to treating larger populations now that we have the ability to do that? I'm really excited to see how that comes about and just watch the marketplace evolve as it needs to embrace these new therapies. So maybe a little less on the technology side, but more on the marketplace side and the receptivity of cell and gene therapies, because we really need to find a way to work this out so patients can benefit from them.
Stefan, continue to follow up on cell therapies with you. Cell therapy is starting to spread its wings in many different ways, from oncology to other areas such as immunology and neurology. Would love your thoughts on how that's going to impact the field.
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to what I mentioned to the previous response, that is where I think the field is going, and everything that the oncology space has opened is now ready for prime time for other cell therapies. I think it's important for all of us to realize that there's other devastating diseases where patients really suffer, not just cancer, but you know, quality of life with end-stage Parkinson's disease is terrible. And I think that's the opportunity we have to bring these advanced therapies into patients that suffer from these diseases and really have an impact on their quality of life. And I think we owe it to them to translate this and expand the application of the technologies that everybody in this room is developing, and put it in the right indication and move it forward. And I think it can really transform how we treat a lot of the degenerative diseases, rare diseases that we have today.
Shifting our focus from technologies to investment, Helen, as we all know, investment in advanced therapies has shifted dramatically over the past 4 years, right? It was sky high in 2019, 2020, the field could do no wrong. You know, last few years has been down significantly. And this year, seemingly, we're on a very positive momentum. How is this kind of up and down roller coaster of investments affecting innovation for companies like Precigen?
No, definitely has been an extremely challenging years for biotech in general, right? And not only from perspective of R&D going through COVID and keeping the force together, but also now with the investors. And I think one of the things that has happened through these challenges is obviously it has pushed the innovation and science move more toward differentiation. Really go after basically platforms and differentiated platforms, because I think that is one of the aspects that a lot of the company had to start prioritizing and looking at their portfolio. What identifies that company? Because that's the only limited sources that you had to put in that. So I think in that sense, I can say that this has somewhat narrow and focused the field. However, in a perspective of innovation, that especially the biotech, which is the engine really for innovation, and moving very rapidly, not having the resources that you bring the next level in, the next generation. I think that is what it suffered in the past 2 or 3 years, because a lot of the companies would have been thinking of, okay, a fast followers that would have been addressing some of the issues that you have in a phase 1s or phase 2s even you see, and you adjust, and you can go to the phase 3 with a much better product, for instance, and not having that ability or having that amount of investment has slowed down that aspects. And definitely it's good to see that basically the investor base is coming back into the table, and also putting back money in biotechs and innovation, and also the big pharmas are coming back in that sense. And now, again, partnerships has started, which always has been important aspects for the biotechs, because I think that partnership is very, very important at the end to move the portfolio of a biotech rapidly to the next levels.
Igor, what do you think? How's all of this disruption affected Iovance?
So Iovance, we're very thankful to the long-term investors we've had who made it possible for us to get the first therapy to FDA approval. But looking at the broader market, 24 looks much better than 23 so far. The XBI briefly crossed over 100, back to about 90, 91 right now. So it's about flat for the year, but it's still up 40% from the low it reached in October of last year. And that's a good thing. There have been several successful IPOs so far this year. But I think the perennial challenge of cell therapy in particular, and cell and gene therapy, is just so capital intensive.
Right.
So even though the markets are doing better, we are, with Iovance, remain very cost conscious. And if I look at my crystal ball, I think if the Fed, the US Federal Reserve, keeps the rates flat and then hopefully starts lowering them in the rest of 24, we'll see more of the generalist investors coming back to the biotech sector and making financing more available to a range of companies, from smaller private companies to larger public ones.
Doug, would love your take from a big pharma perspective. Is big pharma finally paying attention to advanced therapies? And will we see even more investment from them in cell and gene therapies this year?
I really hope so, because I mean, if you sit in this room and you hear the stories, I mean, there's a tremendous opportunity here to treat patients. And granted, maybe the commercial value of these hasn't been realized as quickly as maybe we thought initially. But hopefully, that I think the pendulum will turn, and we can start to get more of that come about. And I think it's also really important. We're talking about making investments in a small biotech and working on both sides. I think there is a benefit to have a big partner on your side who can kind of level out those investments and help buy time to make decisions, or if there's a regulatory delay, or it takes more time to get reimbursement, you have more capital on your side to kind of pull through that. And I think that's the way we can really make sure all these assets get to the right patients. I think too allows you to take a little bit more risk and you're not always having to raise capital for each little milestone. You can actually take some more risk and maybe make some of the bigger investments you need to have to even accomplish some of those market access goals, and do those additional studies that Phil was talking about earlier that you need to, and you have plenty of money to do that early on. So I'm really hoping that financial backing allows there not to be so much wobble, if you will, and we can support, because I think that's one of the ways, I mean, it's not the only way, but I think that's one of the ways we can treat as many patients as possible.
Stefan, any final thoughts?
We're clearly in a unique situation with Bayer being our parent company and operating this arm's length model. And certainly it has helped us tremendously over the last couple of years to even out those cycles of funding, and allowing us to not only focus on our primary asset, which is in the clinic, which is what most biotech companies would do, but also to invest in our pipeline and invest in our manufacturing capabilities and so forth. That's been a tremendous help. On the flip side, it takes away from the biotech spirit. So we've actually had active discussions with our board to say we want to be treated like a biotech. We want to have the people that want to operate in a biotech. Otherwise, we'd be just part of Bayer or a large pharma company. So clearly, the benefits outweigh dramatically, but there's the downside of making sure you operate as a biotech, you're focused on value creation, that somebody can look at and say, yeah, that's my next cycle of investment.
Thank you. Turning to reimbursement, Phil, we've seen a record-breaking approvals in 2023, and hopefully 2024 breaks the records we broke in 2023. How is this affecting and changing the payer and reimbursement landscape, all of these record approvals?
Yeah, I'd also ask my colleague Doug to jump in here because he's living it too. I think we're starting to see, if you go back historically with cell therapies, gene therapies, payers by and large were looking at whether or not something was cost effective. And because relatively rare populations, even if it's not terribly rare, it's not a big hit on their budget. I think as this comes, we're starting to see payers talk about whether or not they can afford it and looking at budget impact. So they're going to be looking both at cost effectiveness and budget impact. And we see certain movements towards that. So in EU, we see Germany doing time-limited approvals, and once they have more data, come back and do the price negotiation. We see in the US carve-outs for gene therapies. Large entities like Cigna, Evacor, Express Scripts are creating carve-outs for health plans, by and large self-funded employer health plans, to look at this. And I think one of the things that we're going to start seeing, and I've heard it from payers, I don't know, Doug, if you've heard it, is we now have 2 products for sickle cell. We now have 2 products for multiple myeloma. We're starting to see the industry mature. And the optimist in me says, that's awesome. However, it's going to come with a higher demand for data and evidence to payers and pricing and contracting. And so we're going to potentially start seeing some of these products being preferred over the other ones.
Doug, what do you think? You're shaking your head, agreeing with Phil?
No, I definitely agree, especially as it comes to having multiple cell and gene therapies in the same space and competing like anything else does. I think maybe with some of the autologous products in limited capacity, sometimes you need multiple products to service the entire market. But I do think increasingly as things that are not autologous therapies, and you have enough capacity to deliver it, I think you are going to see more of that. And we're looking in more and more. Our assets are still pretty early on, but our Parkinson's disease asset and our heart failure assets are treating potentially relatively large patient populations compared to what you've seen. And there are alternative therapies out there. And so really demonstrating the benefit that you have versus those therapies is important. And then as Phil raised, the budget impact gets a lot different when you're seeing a large number of patients, and especially when you're talking to payers now, like I can't pay $4 million times that large number of patients. You kind of got to calm them down. It's like, no, it's not going to be $4 million. Like it's not what it's about. But I think that's going to, the budget impact side is going to be particularly important. And I think also too is, who is that? We talk about this a ton at my office. Like, who is the right patient for cell and gene therapy? You don't need it for everybody. And as we work with earlier in our programs, we need to define like what is that patient that needs it, and then how do you define the right TPP and the right profile and the right evidence supporting that for that particular patient, and be able to identify why this is maybe an appropriate patient for cell and gene therapy, and this one very well may not be. And I think that's something we probably need to wrestle with more as we move away from monogenic diseases and other things.
Helen, how do you think about this going into a BLA submission? Are you thinking about this already? What does your strategy look like given the number of approvals?
Yeah, so the way I look at this, first of all, having more products for this patient, for our patients, is always a good thing, number one. I think I would say that I agree with my colleagues that clearly eventually we are moving toward the products that they show higher safety, higher efficacy, and based on that, and very specific precision prescription for these patients, then I think that then you can look at basically the pricing and how that can differentiate itself from the others. But at the end of the day, I think what we are looking at is because the overall costs that these patients have to go through in lifespan. When I look at, for instance, the RRP, as we are going through the BLA, this patient population, when you're looking at someone who has had the disease from an age of 3, and their parents had taken them basically on a monthly basis to remove these, and now the patient is 50 years old. You can imagine the cost of not only what it has occurred basically on a health cost that all of the basically insurances and the health organizations have to pay, but also on a patient, the level that these patients, a lot of them cannot work, they cannot have a quality of life. And I think all of that comes to play at the end of the day in what will be really the pricing, because you cannot really replace that when your child, you know that it's basically is cured at the end of the day, and they don't have to go through that. So that's how I look at this.
Igor, would love your perspective as you're going into various countries with your therapy on how you're facing these issues.
I mean, we're early in the process. So in the US, we're launching. Again, the launch is going very well so far. In Europe, we'll need to face this in the coming, well, hopefully in about a year. Plan to file in the next couple of months. So we will see. Yeah. But the way we view this, the unmet need is high. So the initial indication we're targeting is post-PD-1 melanoma. In that setting, there are no approved therapies. Sure. Chemo has very short response, very low response rate with very low durability. So the unmet need is clearly there.
Stefan, on a similar topic, right, historically many of those therapies have been improved for rare disease, and now we're seeing a growing pipeline for more prevalent conditions. How is that going to shift the paradigm, in your opinion, for cell and gene therapy sector?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we have to now think about much more about cost of goods for making these products. We have to really so from the manufacturing side, that's a challenge. It's not just how much it costs, but also the scale. We need to be able to produce these. We also think a lot about distribution models and how patients get access to it. You know, it's one thing to have, for a rare indication, some sort of special transport, charter flight, bring the patient here or there. That's just not going to be feasible when you're thinking about treating patients with Parkinson's or heart failure. So all these elements now need to be, you know, turned to 11 when you think about how you develop these products. Yeah.
Helen, you want to add something?
Maybe I can just add also, I think the shift in a regulatory mindset that we are seeing at the FDA level, I think this will be also very helpful for the eventually the pricing and the payers, because reality of the situation is, yes, certain indication you have to have a phase 3 and randomized. In a lot of different indications like rare diseases, you can have pivotal trials with a single arm and a limited number of patients, especially based on the safety starting and the efficacy that it's seen. So clearly, that will be leading into the much less cost of drug development eventually as we move on. And I think in the long run, that will also change the field, and it will change the results in a much better situation for the patients, for the companies, and for rapid treatments being developed into going to patients.
Thanks, Helen. Well, I think we could sit up here and talk about all these topics for many more hours, but unfortunately we have only a few more minutes, so I wanted to ask you guys a final question. What are each one of you excited about your respective company and the sector in the upcoming year? And I'll start. I think the level of optimism this year has been great to see come back, right? I think last year, everyone was kind of worried about the market, worried about the industry. There were some not so good news about clinical performance of some of our sector's companies. And people were saying that we were really going to need a really big year in 2023 to turn the industry back to where it was, and we're going to need the market to soften. Well, many of those things have happened. We've certainly had a tremendous year in 2023. We're looking forward to an even better year in 2024, and the markets have softened. So I think just the level of optimism that I'm hearing and that's in the room has increased dramatically from last year. So that's what I'm excited about, which hopefully means more drugs to more patients. So Igor, I'll start with you. What are you excited about?
So for Iovance, the commercial launch of Amtagvi is one. The submissions for EU, Canada, UK, also this year. The pivotal trials we're running for patients with non-small cell lung cancer and frontline melanoma. So there's a lot of things I'm excited about for Iovance. For the industry overall, better financing environment and a lot of new therapies hopefully coming to market, and a lot of new technologies, brilliant new technologies entering earlier stages of development to feed the pipeline. That's what I'm excited about.
Great. Phil?
Approvals, pending approvals. We work on a lot of products, and it's nice to see them get to a finish line and get to a patient, which is what we're all trying to do. I like with Anshul optimism. I feel like I can talk to people again. So yeah, definitely approvals because it really helps the industry.
Yeah, external and internal. I think external, again, we're talking about the environment seems much better. It's really nice to hear some podcasts that aren't all doom and gloom, or be here it's not doom and gloom, and maybe people buying things that's like you don't feel depressed. So that's just generally good. I think I'm also pretty excited about maybe say the commercial innovation that's going on with the CGTs that are launching and looking at the different things they're working on. And Phil talked about some of the things, different approaches to bringing those therapies to market, because obviously I'm watching those to see how we can apply those. I think it's exciting to see those. And then internally, we have some cool decisions we're making. We're working very closely with our BlueRock colleagues. We have great data coming out and starting to make decisions about how we advance those programs. So it's starting to become real. So that's internally, that's what I'm excited about.
Stefan, what are you excited about?
Yeah, maybe coming from the science side, I saw the pluripotent stem cell field grow up for the last 20 years. In the beginning, when iPS cells first came out and nobody really knew what to do with them, everything was science fiction, right? I think this last year and this year, we're really turning it into reality with not just a lot of ongoing phase 1 trials, but groups talking about phase 2 trials for the first time, sort of cementing that, yeah, these therapies have a potential benefit. They're worth exploring in a phase 2 trial. That's where we're going to really put them to the test. Super exciting times.
Great. Helen, last but not least.
I think globally, I agree with what everyone says. The approvals continuously and the speed that now cell and gene therapy has taken. I think this is outstanding for the patient. And I think the fact that innovation now is understood with the risk-benefit ratio. And before, it was always a checkbox. It was not about really what is the benefit for the patient versus what kind of a risk you're taking. And now it's becoming much more obvious. On a obviously company level for us, we are very excited about the submission of our BLA, the first drug, changing eventually the format of a company from an R&D company to a commercial company is always exciting. Being able to move more of our portfolio in various platforms. So we are looking forward to that.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you guys for listening.